Hello, everybody out there in comic book land. My name is George Serrano, aka The Don, and if you're watching this, you can only be here for one reason. That's a brand new episode of Major Discourse, where we talk to the individuals in the comic medium just to see what makes them tick. As always, I am never alone. I am joined by Alex Garcia, aka the Comic OG, the Cog. Tell the people what's up.
Hey, it's Alex Garcia, aka the Comic OG, like he says. Let's get the paranda going, baby.
Oh, it's a party over here, man. We're about to have a party today, ladies and gentlemen. We have a very special guest here today. Part Cubano, part Colombiano, part writer, part rebel, part revolutionary, one of Blue Beetle's best buds, and the brilliant brain behind Beast of Borikén. He likes this country like he likes his Coronas. No ice. Mi hermano, mi gente, the talented Julio Anta. Julio, how are you doing?
I'm doing even better after that intro. Thank you. I love that. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
No, we are happy to have you here too and talk about some of your great works here. I was looking through some of the stuff that you've been working on, some of the stuff that's already out, and I was blown away by this idea that your very first book, the breakout book, Home, that you created, after spending so much time cold pitching the series, is actually being taught in schools now.
Oh yeah.
It has its own like teacher guide in the back. How does it feel to have created a work that not only entertains but now educates? I don't know if that was, I assume when you put a lot of the messaging in it that you did it, that was partially some of its purpose, but now it is quite literally being used to educate. How does that feel as a creative?
Yeah, no, it's amazing. All of my books I view them as sort of like an extension of my activism. So there was, part of Home was always to educate people while entertaining them. The idea was that this comic book might be someone's first time viewing a humanistic portrayal of a migrant child. Maybe they were,
Yeah.
maybe they've watched Fox News, maybe they've had, they have whatever influences in their life, but maybe this is the first time that they're seeing like a deeply empathetic portrayal. So yeah, it's definitely I was going to say the back of my mind, but really the front of my mind to try to, make an impact on people. But the teaching it in schools was something that I never could have imagined. I did not know that teachers' guides existed for comics. I did not know that comics were taught in schools. And, since then, now all of my books have educator guides, have teachers' guides to be able to use them in the classroom. I visit a lot of schools and universities, which is wild because I'm a community college dropout, So, to see my
Yeah.
comics, out there, people, I know of 3 dissertations that have featured my comic in it, that have featured Home. These are like graduate level, like, they're finding things I'm learning about my book reading it, they're
That's
finding all
amazing.
sorts of stuff in it. But yeah, so it's super, super powerful, super, it's definitely encourages me to keep going.
I find that this medium is an excellent medium for literacy, but also
Hmm.
I think one of its other inherent traits is it's an excellent medium for empathy. I think that,
Hmm.
like you said, sometimes we were talking about, we just reviewed Tom King's Super Girl, Woman of Tomorrow. And
Hmm.
in there, they have thinly veiled, like there's a planet with purple people and blue people, and the blue people are not too
Hmm.
nice to the purple people. And
Hmm.
sometimes just framed in fiction, people can swallow the medicine a little bit better,
Yeah.
given a different perspective. And I think that that's so important, especially with the kids of today. There's a lot of slop to take in,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of misinformation to take in. And I don't think there are many, besides some of the books that you've tackled, point of view characters that can explain kind of what they have gone through. I feel like the
Hmm.
characterization of the migrant is, this person in the shadows trying to take your job and trying to take your home. And I think that portrayal hasn't done the culture any good. And
Oh
books
yeah.
like yours are kind of pushing that kind of stuff forward. But with Home serving as your breakout project, can you talk about like the initial reaction to that book and how its success affected your career? Did you like, was this something like, I've made this, I wanted this, and if one person reads it, it's fine? Or was this like, I really need this to kind of, I really need this
No,
to
no,
kind of take off?
this was so I started off making mini comics, like 4 to 10 page short stories, and they were all very politically charged, about things I was angry about, things I was passionate about, things that I wanted to see changed, all sorts of things. And when I made Home, which was actually I pursued a career in comics, or not even a career. I wasn't thinking about a career. I was just thinking about I wanted to make something. I pursued all of this because I had the idea for Home. And then I taught myself how to make comics by making mini comics, all in service of eventually getting to tell a story of Home and pitching it to publishers and trying to find someone that would be willing to publish it. Um, but the reaction to Home is kind of twofold, right? Like, this book is a book that I think has become successful as time has gone on. It was very much, I think, especially as an image book, very much like middle of the road sales. It was maybe bottom to middle of the road sales. It wasn't a hit. um, and the first day I was getting DMs on Twitter, back when Twitter was still like a usable platform. I was getting DMs on Twitter, on Instagram. I was getting emails from people who were just like so happy to be seeing this portrayal of a migrant for the first time in a mainstream-ish comic book.
Yeah.
And it was something that, was flattering at first, right? Like, I'm proud of myself. I made this thing. But then really it just like made me angry all over again. It's like, how is it that in 2021, it's the first time that you're seeing a story that resembles your own in a comic book?
Yeah.
That's crazy. And that just encouraged me to keep going. But then on the other hand, obviously, there was a huge backlash that I got also. I remember the day that issue one came out, some Comicsgate guy posted a video that it got more views than we sold issues of
Oh my
issue one.
gosh.
And that almost, like, just to be totally transparent, like it almost ruined my day. Like
Yeah.
I'd worked so hard. My first issue, an Image comic issue, was out. And then I saw this video. It was like a 40-minute long rant. Um, and it was just like shitting on the whole book. And obviously it was in bad faith. Obviously, there was nothing for me to gain from it. But so there have obviously been negative reactions, but I would say like 90% positive. When I do conventions, it's still one of the top books that gets sold at my table, that I get brought to sign, single issues of. People are always asking me when there's going to be another volume. Like, it is a book that has had an impact. So I'm proud of that. But I think it's happened over time. It wasn't
Yeah.
a hit book when it launched.
I could see that. I could see that being something that kind of ends up being a slow burn. You mentioned at your table, a little bit of an embarrassing story.
Mhm.
We this MegaCon, I went to some of the panels that you were talking at, and this was our first time kind of walking around and giving out cards to try to interview. And you were sitting
Mhm.
there. I want to say we were sitting there with Jacoby Salcedo.
Yeah, yeah, he was
Yeah,
next to
yeah, 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 yeah. And I'm just like, I don't know how to pitch. Like, I wasn't sure how to pitch it
me.
in person. You were definitely somebody that I wanted to chat to, but it just shows you the difference in perspective there. Because I hear of
Yeah.
your story of going table to table to try to pitch this initially,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
there really is no barrier on the other side of the table. I assume that there were these big gatekeepers keeping me from talking to
No.
creatives about the creative process, but I don't think it exists as in the way that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe for some of the bigger guys, maybe Scott Snyder, it'll.
Yeah, yeah,
But for
right.
me, no. Like I'm there. Like, I'll be
Oh,
honest
yeah,
with you. Like, MegaCon was kind of slow. There were definitely moments where I was just waiting to go to Universal Studios that night.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
but the panels were great. Like, the panels were well attended. They were great panels. So I had a great time. And anytime I can be in Orlando, I'm down.
That has to also
Um,
recharge your batteries, right? In the sense of like any sort of vitriol you get online, and then you meet actual people because we as we've been told countless times, the people that are talking to us sometimes are not online may not actually be a genuine representation of
Oh yeah.
of the comic book space. So it has to kind of recharge your batteries in a way to get in front of the people that your work affects.
Yeah, I mean, I always come back from Comic Cons, from library conventions, book festivals, all these events that I go to. I always come back energized and inspired to like keep pushing and work on the next thing. Because I think it's twofold. It's the people who come to the table and tell you that your book means something to them, and it's also seeing other people, other creators, and seeing what they're doing, seeing like I'll give you an example, like Brett Bean, who does Dork, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Emerald City Comic Con last year, he and I were seated next to each other, and it was like there were moments where like I had more people at my table than he did.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it was pretty dead. But like I think he'd told me about the book already. But it wasn't like, it was still like a year away or something. And
Right.
now, like we do conventions and he has a line all day long,
Yeah.
so like stuff like that is really exciting to see people that you're friends with or people that like are your colleagues in a way, to see
Mm-hmm.
them blow up. For me, like I know that for some people that could lead to like the jealousy of like, oh, why, but for me it's like I want to be there too, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like so that to me is like really encouraging. So I kind of get like that two level of inspiration to keep working on what I'm working on when I go to conventions.
I could dig it.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned barriers before, and you mentioned this story. I was getting flustered and already because these stories are so common. Did you ever see the
Mhm.
movie La Misma Luna, Underneath the Same Moon?
Yeah. Hmm.
That was right around the time, I believe, of Home, right? Home came out in 2008 or
No, no, no.
2018,
Home came out 18. Yeah,
2018,
yeah, yeah,
2018.
yeah, yeah.
But like, this movie came out 2007, 2018.
Hmm.
I think you've heard of a writer by the name of Brian K. Vaughan, right?
Yeah, of course. Barrier.
He also came out with a book called Barrier.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Did you read that?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So these stories are constantly coming out, but then it also feels like they have to be buried at the same time.
hmm
And that just infuriates me as a first generation American.
yeah. No, definitely. I mean,
How do you tolerate it?
yeah. I mean, a big inspiration for Home was my own family's story. My dad came to this country when he was 5 years old. My mom was born here, but she's what you would now call an anchor baby. Her parents were undocumented from Colombia. For
Mm,
15, almost 20 years. So it comes from that place, like that very deeply personal place that I write these stories.
mm,
But it also comes from when we were talking offline before we started recording. I grew up in Miami, and Miami is a town that is 70% Latino, and
Mm-hmm.
it is majority Cuban. But like all of our politicians, all of my teachers, just everybody in my life were Latino and Latinas. And despite all of that, I never saw myself in any media outside of like telenovelas, on like
Yeah, yeah.
Univision and Telemundo.
Mm-hmm.
Very
And I
Paco.
also, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, yeah, no, no, no. Well, yeah, when we talk about the Chupacabra, we'll talk about Primer Impacto for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like all of this comes from a place of like, I write for myself first and foremost, and I'm not that unique of a person, so I know that there's going to be a lot of other people that are going to connect to what I write when I write just for myself. And sometimes I'm writing for 10-year-old Julio. Sometimes I'm writing for today, like Beast of Borikén. This is a comic that if it existed, I wouldn't have written it. This is the kind of
Sure.
book that I want to read today. So yeah, like all of it comes from that place of like, uh, I think deeply personal, but also that I want to see us in media more, and I want to see our stories because I've obviously written immigrant stories and migration stories, but we're so much more than that. That's a small aspect, and as time has gone on, that's become an even more impactful aspect. But it's not all of it. So like I have books like Speak Up Santiago, which is like a middle grade graphic novel that's bilingual. It's in English and Spanish, and it's about a kid that struggles to speak Spanish
Yeah.
and loves to play soccer. So, it's a very like joyful book in a way that Home might not be. So yeah, all of these books come from what I want to read and from, a very personal place.
Yeah, I think sometimes people get tripped up on the word like diversity, right? And it to them,
Hmm.
especially on paper, it's mostly like diversity of color, diversity of race. And I think when it comes to
Hmm.
the creative spaces, what's most important is diversity of perspective, the story, right? The
Hmm.
story that is inherent to certain cultures and stuff like that. I really dig how you use your creativity to make these sharp statements about real world issues. But during this process, was there ever any sort of trepidation about tackling these subjects, especially when like major publishers seemed like hesitant to divide the fan base for financial reasons? No?
No. This is why I make this work. You know, like, uh, yeah, I don't want to name names, but like, you know, there have been times that I've been offered projects that I have nothing to say in that project. So I don't do it. You know, the vast majority of my work is original self-generated work. You know,
Right.
like I've written Blue Beetle, but even Blue Beetle was I had an editor at DC and I brought her the idea. You know what
Right.
I mean? So like uh the work that I do always is from my point of view and my interests. And my point of view is a very politicized point of view. And it's a point of view that is extremely curious. And every book comes from, you know, me staying up late researching something and
Yeah.
becoming fascinated by something or becoming angry about something. You know, like with Beast of Borikén, you know, that book came from like, you know, talking about the human aspect, not the chupacabra, which we can talk about, but
Yeah.
it comes from friends, Puerto Rican friends who told me about what was happening. It comes from watching a YouTube video from a journalist named Bianca Grau, you know, talking about the Essencia project. It comes from all these different places that are all inherently political. So, you know, for me, I've tried to be really smart about finding the right partners and finding the people that will, I don't want to say protect my vision, but you know, give me the cover that I need to do what I want to do. So like with the Blue Beetle graphic novel, which you know, I would say is the most political Blue Beetle story that has
Yeah.
been published by DC.
Yeah.
You know, I made a connection with an editor there who I was already working with on some short stories. And she protected the vision. You know, I pitch anytime I'm asked to pitch on something or anytime I pitch any story, I write I make it, I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. I ensure that I don't self-censor, right?
Okay.
I can have a lot of perceptions about how DC is going to react to an idea, how Image, how Dark Horse, whatever. But when I pitch, it is the unfiltered version of what I would like to see happen. And if they want to come and give me notes and say, hey, this is taking things a little too far, can we tone this down? Then that's a conversation that we can have. And I can make decisions based on like the integrity of the project.
Yeah.
But when I pitch a story, it is fully exactly what I want to do. And if you read the pitch for the Blue Beetle graphic novel, This Land is Our Land, it is almost exactly what the book is. And that's because I worked with an editor that would protect that vision. So yeah, you know, and that's also why I spend so much time and effort to promote these books because I do know that in a capitalist system, these publishers, they're not doing this out of charity, you know?
Yeah.
They, as somebody who makes deeply political work, it also needs to be work that is financially successful to them so that I can keep doing this.
Yeah.
So these are like all things that I have to consider, but it's all in service of continuing to make work that is, from my point of view, that is as politically pointed as you were mentioning. Because that's the whole point of doing all this. You know, it isn't to, you know, write Spider-Man one day. Not to say that I wouldn't,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean? Like, I am not trying to become the Batman writer or the Spider-Man writer. I'm trying to be a writer that makes art, that writes about things that I care about. And if sometimes it intercepts with Blue Beetle or
Hmm.
whatever, then that's awesome, you know, but that is never the point.
That I find that fascinating because that just speaks to your integrity, with the passion and the energy you're trying to come to your work with. And you would think if someone's trying to break in into the comic book world, they usually give up a lot of concessions, right? Because it's like, you know, if you're trying
Mhm.
to hire me, then I guess, yeah, I'll do whatever you say. Your ability to kind of stick to what you're trying to say, I just find that fascinating, and it just makes me dig you more as a creative because I loved
Oh,
your take
thanks, man.
on yeah, I loved your take on Jaime Reyes but did not expect one of the primary antagonists to be such a stark real world threat like right wing extremism. I was reading
Mhm.
this along with my coworker, and I was like, "You got to see some of these panels, man! Like you got to see some of these because it's so reflective." But I was like, I'm like trying to think to myself. The very first things that came to my mind was like, is he able to do this because it's YA and they're not like really looking? Because this
Mhm.
felt so
Mhm.
targeted, right? And
Yeah.
but it came from again such real life events. It never came across as cartoonish. It never came across as a
Mhm.
demonization of those people in a way that you didn't understand how they got there. Not to say that they got there through
Yeah.
right reasoning, but you can understand. And I
Yeah.
think understanding and empathizing can be two different things. But why was it important for you to include that specific type of villain in a mainstream superhero book?
Yeah. The to me, the I think you're talking about Riley, right? The
Yes.
his ex best friend, right?
Hmm.
So Riley to me is maybe the most important character in that book. Riley is. It was really important to me to treat him with empathy because this is something that a lot of teenage boys go through. I think especially a lot of isolated teenage boys. And for those of you who are listening and haven't read the book, it's called This Land Is Our Land. And it is essentially an origin story of Jaime Reyes, but an extremely grounded version of the Blue Beetle story, where El Paso, which is obviously a border town, is experiencing what a lot of border towns experience, which is obviously an influx of migration, but also a sort of villainization from the outside. There's a lot of people talking about all the horrible things that are supposedly happening in El Paso. There's a lot of people that are, demonizing Jaime's friends and family because they are migrants. And then there's this kid who is taking all that in, this American kid who has spent, probably his whole childhood. I don't remember the exact timeline that we
Yeah,
put in the
yeah,
book, but
yeah.
he's for years he's an army brat, so his dad moves to different bases and he moves too, and every time he struggles to make friends, he becomes more isolated, he spends more time on the internet. But he's also a curious kid, so he has questions, and I think about myself and I think about, all the times that I've had questions and I still have questions and I go onto the internet or I go into a book or I
Yeah.
ask someone and I know now as an adult how to how to vet sources and how to figure out like what are people's true intentions. Um, but as a 15, 16-year-old kid, you might go on YouTube and you might put in a very innocent thought, and then now your whole algorithm is right wing, white replacement theory. Like I'll speak from personal experience. I watched a video that was like breaking down an operation during the Iraq War, right, where it
Okay.
was like this was the objective, this is what happened, and it was like some guy in the military was like they were showing footage, like body cam footage, and he was explaining everything, like not from even any political perspective, just like a military breakdown. And then the next video that I get is a Ben Shapiro video,
There you
and then
go.
the next,
Yeah.
and then I'm like, let me see what comes next, and it's a Charlie Kirk video. And so it's like the algorithms are really just they're like fine tuned to keep you on, right? They want you to just keep scrolling, keep watching, keep interacting with the platform, but also they do it by sending us to our most base instincts a lot of times.
Yeah.
So that's something that happened to this kid, to Riley. And we have a sequence in the book where it shows his radicalization. And it shows, like how he got to this point. And the honest truth is that that was the first scene that I ever came up for the book. And it was a lot of the book was in service of that scene because to me that was so important to really show how it can happen to a kid, and how it can, I don't want to say that he had no agency and it was through no fault of his own.
Yeah.
I'm sure he had his prejudices, but we can't abandon 16-year-old kids just because they've gone down this rabbit hole. This
Yeah.
rabbit hole designed by billionaire corporations to keep
Yeah.
them using YouTube or to keep them on TikTok or
Mhm.
whatever. So that was a big part of the book, was to obviously there's a criticism of immigration policies, but it's also to try to humanize and empathize with kids that do go down this path, so that we can find a way to get them back. And it is a YA graphic novel. It is designed for that age group. So also I hope like a warning for kids when they read that, and maybe it'll help them with friends in their life that are going through that, and that they see their friend, every once in a while they're saying something a little racist.
Yeah.
So yeah, but most importantly, it had to be a superhero sci-fi story.
Yeah.
So like there's always that underpinning of like, what are the themes? What is this about? What do I want to say?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it can't just be a speech.
Like a lecture. Yeah.
It can't be a lecture. It still has to be a great story, that
Yeah.
has these elements and that it makes sense with the story, with the characters. But at the end of the day, it's a superhero sci-fi origin story.
Yeah. But that story, like you said, is a story that's going on all over the country. I remember one time I was
Yeah.
on YouTube when I was a younger man. I was on YouTube and
Mhm.
I got hit with an ad, and it didn't present itself for what it was initially. But it was like, don't you think men were respected a bit more when you were growing up? Don't you think they had like more of a place in this world? And I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
wait a second. That
Yeah.
that does sound kind of whatever. And then they were like, then they cut to like, and women think they're getting paid less. And I'm like, wait, no, they are getting paid less. That's when I was like,
Right.
okay, wait a
Yeah.
minute.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right, right,
And
right, right.
it was a PragerU video. It was a video meant to
Yeah.
pull people and bring them into corners and try to educate them in their
Mhm.
own, warped view of what's going on. And I have to, give thanks to my, what was she? To my fifth grade teacher, Miss Mohammed, because she was the one early in the game to be like, hey, listen, we're not doing Columbus Day here. As a matter of fact,
Yeah.
on Columbus
Awesome.
Day, I'm going to play Native American flute music, and I want you guys to close your eyes and imagine how you would
Mhm.
feel if someone came in the middle of the night and took your homes and
Awesome.
slaughtered some of your people. And when you're
Yeah.
that age, I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, this is
Yeah.
bonkers stuff. But without that trigger, without that
Hmm.
empathy as a youth, I would have got swept up in anyone trying to explain the world to me, especially in a way that says you did nothing wrong. You've done
Yeah.
nothing wrong. The world's been
Hmm.
done wrong to you, and I can
Hmm.
show you who exactly it is that's doing this to you, and it's this group of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like I can understand how people can fall down those rabbit holes. That's why that Riley story just rang so true to me. But I've also heard you mention that Civil War was one of the first major superhero stories you picked up from the spinner racks.
Yeah.
Do you think it's kind of like critique on real world policies hammered home to you that this is a powerful place to do such a thing, to kind of criticize harmful politics?
Yeah, I haven't, that's interesting. I haven't really considered that, but so Civil War was the first comic book series that I started buying at the comic shop. Like I had, like I would go to the drugstore or the gas station and grab like a random Spider-Man, random X-Men, whatever. Sonic the Hedgehog, when it was at Archie, was like a huge thing for me when I was a kid. So but Civil War was probably like the first arc of a comic, like the first full story that I read.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm sure that the fact that it is pretty grounded and, about, political issues of, sometimes the state is wrong, and we need to stand up against the state, right? I'm sure that had an impact on me for sure. But yeah, that was it was also the first time that I was like, wow, like this is serious. Like this is a
Yeah.
serious comic, for a I don't know, what year was it? Was it like 2006 or something?
Five,
Around
six,
that
yeah,
time.
Or
5, 6.
five? Yeah. So I was like 15 years old.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, like this is like a serious comic. This like comics can, even with superheroes, be about serious
Mhm.
things. So yeah, I'm sure it had some impact on me for sure.
That's the
I
first time I got
what
into Cap. because I didn't think I, like now I had a cap off shirt on earlier. That's why I was looking down.
Mhm.
But now, yeah, like I remember thinking initially when I heard the premise of Civil War, like, okay, so Captain America is obviously going to be on the side of the state. What you big whoop? Why do I have to
Mhm.
read this
Mhm.
story? He's obviously, and then like the first issue of him being like, nah, and jumping off the helicarrier. I was like, oh, I'm jumping with
Yeah.
that guy. I'm with that
Right.
guy. But
And then eventually you start to learn about the history of Captain America, and
yeah,
how very often against the state.
yeah, nomad and
But
stuff.
yeah.
The
Yeah,
Mhm.
still, I
100%.
still consider the. Did you read even the stuff that came right after, like the
I like the Brubaker stuff, or
even the one shot? I still say the one
mm,
shot that where Iron Man is talking to Cap's corpse, where he's basically
mm.
like divulging his emotions to Cap, but Cap's dead. It's when
Oh
Crossbones
yeah,
assassinates him,
yeah, yeah. He got.
and
Okay.
it's called
No, I
like
don't. I don't
Civil.
think I've read it.
It's a great issue, single issue, and because that talk about being divisive. That series made everybody, are you team Cap or team Iron Man?
Hmm.
And I was one of the few people that's like, man, I can see both sides.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that was
Hmm.
almost a bad thing to say, like, whoa, you got to pick a side. Like, do I? It's
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
it's 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 two heroes, and all the
Yeah.
Peter Parker stuff and all this stuff, and then that issue came out where Iron Man is just explaining, hey, I'm here to. I was trying to put an armor around the world, right? Essentially, like
Hmm.
Age of Ultron,
Hmm.
but he's confessing his guilt to a corpse because now it's
Yeah.
too late, and it's
Hmm.
a lot of times I feel like that happens even in real life, right? Because people are too busy
Yeah.
arguing, you don't get that chance to have that conversation until it's too late.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah. No, I
highly
need to check
recommend
that
that.
out. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
I think it's called Civil War: The Confession.
Okay.
That makes
One
sense.
shot, one shot. Bendis, beautiful,
Yeah.
beautifully.
We often get the criticism that we might be diving a little bit too deep into this medium, but I think that's why it exists. I
Hmm.
think that you
Yeah.
get deep enough and you see some very interesting things. The same connection I made with you in Civil War, I was also trying to piece your fandom of The Walking Dead when it came out in comics, because I'm wondering if
Hmm.
maybe the rebuilding of society, right, by different rules, because the
Hmm.
old rules don't really work anymore.
Yeah.
Getting your group together to survive the people out there that want to do you harm. What was it about the human condition as depicted in that series that made you a fan?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm just drawn to grounded stories, and like that's what I enjoyed reading. So it's what I enjoy writing as well. But yeah, I think yeah, maybe going off of what I said with Civil War also, like I think it so I got back into comics when I started reading Walking Dead when I got back into comics. As maybe like in my early 20s or something,
Yeah.
after taking a break in between. And with Walking Dead, it was the first time I ever binged comics,
Yeah.
where like I bought the first hardcover, like the deluxe edition hardcover, and I
Yeah.
just read it through all the way because Kirkman doesn't put chapter breaks
No.
in his collected editions. So which now as a writer, I'm like, man, like it's a little weird to not like, because it was serialized, so, and he does write with cliffhangers in mind, but oftentimes you couldn't tell what issue you were on.
Yeah.
But it did lend itself to me just like reading an entire hardcover and then like buying the next five so that I can just keep
Yeah.
going. um so yeah, I definitely think. I mean, I know that it was an inspiration because I have a new book that's coming out in September called No Gods, No Masters.
Yes.
It'll
Yes.
be
Yes.
published by Boom, and The Walking Dead's a huge inspiration for that because it is a sort of survival horror book. But instead of in a world of zombies, it's in the aftermath of a giant
Uh,
kaiju turning New York City into a wasteland, essentially. But it is, unlike other like kaiju movies or comics where like the protagonist is oftentimes like someone in the military, like or a scientist or someone trying to stop and like save humanity. This is just about kids trying to survive, and that
Mhm.
comes directly from The Walking Dead.
yeah.
They're not trying to save the world; they're just trying to survive.
I saw
And
the.
that was,
I was
yeah.
going
Go
to
ahead.
say I saw the trailer on Instagram. I'm very excited for it. You did a great job
Cool.
putting that out. So I remember that
Thank you,
now.
thank you, man.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I'm stoked to see how that ends up coming out. But your career has really been about putting like the exact stories that on the shelves that you would have wanted to read. Like you said, if they
Mhm.
existed, then you wouldn't have written them. They're deeply human stories grounded by political message. What do you say to the voices in the comic book space that argue that this medium should be purely escapism?
I don't care. I don't have anything to say. I don't have anything to say to that. I read escapist stuff too.
Yeah, yeah,
I think there's a place for that. But that's not what I'm going to write.
yeah,
That's not why I'm here. That's not why I'm making comics. Uh, I take comics very seriously. I know that a lot of times from the outside world it might seem like a silly thing, and I have an 11-year-old son, so I'm constantly interacting with like parents,
yeah, yeah,
who
yeah.
are, they're like, you write comics, like, so what else do you do? You do that full time? It's like it's
Yeah.
so foreign, right? To like, I don't like normies. I don't know what how, like regular people, right?
Right.
Like they still make comic books, like they still
Yeah,
like there's comic book shops still exist,
yeah,
so like I'm especially like living in the city, where like I'm some of the kids that my son goes to school with, like these are like investment banker parents, these are what out like all across the spectrum. But the point that I'm making is that I take this seriously, even though maybe the rest of the world sometimes it feels like doesn't take this as a serious medium. And because I take it seriously, I take my art seriously. And it was Nina Simone who said that true art should be a reflection of the real world. And that's something that I hold in my heart constantly when I'm making my work. And sometimes the real world is escapism, but a lot of times, most of the times, the real world is very serious and it is very political. And I am of the belief that everything is political. Everything that we experience in life, all of the good, all of the bad. Um, so when I make my work, even if I'm writing for younger readers, and maybe if, it to an adult, it might seem like escapism, they're still at the heart of it is still the same kinds of stories that I'm interested in telling. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't debate with anyone who says that comics should be escapism. That's fine if that's what they believe. But I take it really seriously, so I'm going to write things that are serious to me.
no, I think that's an excellent answer. I also, came across Si Se Puedes, and that feels like a genuine love letter to Latin revolutionaries throughout history. Were you always well
Mhm.
versed in the history of these figures, or can you describe the personal experience of unearthing these stories of struggle, resistance to help make them household names, which I feel like you have helped do? I think there's way
Oh.
more important people there than people I was told about growing up
Mhm.
in history class.
Yeah, I mean, the reason this book exists is because I grew up in Miami, like I said before, 70% Latino. All my teachers were Latinas, and I didn't learn shit about Latinos. You know,
That's true.
like I didn't learn shit about the history of why are we here, right? The first chapter of Si Se Puede attempts to answer the question, why are we all here? What led to all of us from an entire continent, from two continents, the Caribbean, Central America, South America, parts of North America? How did we all get to this country? And it examines, the U.S. imperialism that led to the destruction of a lot of our countries, and which always leads you back to the empire. A book that really shaped my understanding and helped me, I think, understand what my identity is and where we come from, is a book called Harvest of Empire by Juan Gonzalez. And this is a book that the main thesis is that you can trace the migration of Latinos to the United States through every single form of US imperialism in Latin America. When the US has a coup in another country, when the US foments a civil war in a country, you always see people leaving that country and coming to the United States. Um, And it also talks about, the achievements of Latinos and building community here and the resiliency. So yeah, I learned everything that I wrote in that book. I learned as an adult, and I learned as somebody who wanted desperately to find Latino heroes. Like I think the people that we cover in the book that are the most known from an activist perspective is people like Dolores Huerta, right? But I didn't know about Dolores Huerta until I was an adult,
Yeah, which is a
which is kind
shame.
of crazy,
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, that book is definitely my most, quote unquote, educational and like made to teach. It's a nonfiction graphic novel, but it's one that, again, it's used in so many classrooms, so it's one that I'm really proud of. There's things I do differently now. There's people I wouldn't put in it. Uh,
Right.
but no one needs Lin Manuel Miranda in a book anymore.
Fair.
Or J Lo.
Yeah.
Uh, but I definitely perspectives change also. So like every day I continue to grow and I continue to find new political consciousness. So like my next nonfiction graphic novel that is in the vein of Si Se Puede is about Latin American revolutionaries in Latin America. So people like Simon Bolivar, people like Pedro Albizu Campos. So yeah, this is a U.S. Latino centric book.
Mhm.
Here's all the great things that Latinos have contributed to the United States, despite all of the hurdles, despite all of the attacks. But the next one will be about, actual revolutionaries in Latin America.
Yeah,
I
I think
mean,
it's crazy the cognitive dissonance that happens sometimes because, like, even now I hear a lot of the criticism in the UK and even here is like all these Muslims are moving in and they're just
Hmm.
coming out of nowhere, and it's like we
Hmm.
bombed their homes. We spent like
Yep.
2 decades going over there and roughing stuff up, and then when they
Yep.
come over here because they have no
Then we're
home, we
surprised.
bombed them.
Yeah.
Then we're like, where did they all came from nowhere? Like just the yeah,
Hmm.
that happens on occasion.
yeah.
Sorry, Alex, go
I
ahead.
no, while you were learning this in high school, I was in college. I went to SUNY
Hmm.
Stony Brook. I don't know if you've
Okay.
and
Yeah, yeah.
an elective I took for fun was the history of Latin America.
Cool.
And it was done. I wish I knew his first name because I just knew him as Professor Gonzalez.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so he taught us all the stuff that was happening in Central America, the creation of Panama,
Hmm.
Nicaragua and Honduras and the Sandinistas and the Contras,
Yep.
and even stuff with the IMF and how the IMF has decimated South America.
Hmm.
And all from my perspective, because at that age and my mentality, I just and learn and knowing what was happening with Europe, with the European Union, I was always like, why doesn't Latin America do that?
Hmm.
And that always
Do
bothered
what?
me. Unite. You know,
Oh, yeah. I mean, there is a sort of UN of Latin America. I think it's called the OAS, Organization of American States. But they're just as much of a paper tiger as as the UN.
and
Yeah.
that's I what I argue a lot because in my class the professor would talk about like kind of like doing the whole fist pumping of Latin countries and how this country has a stake in coffee beans and Americans love coffee and
Hmm.
they have the plátanos and they have this and I go okay, so why are we so desperate to sell it to America? Let's sell it to
Hmm.
ourselves and
Yep.
make
Yep.
Self-sustaining.
self-sustaining, and that way then you can sit there and go not be a paper tiger but be an iron
Hmm.
tiger and say, oh, you want our
Hmm.
coffee, right? You want our plátanos. Because I
Yep.
one thing I can't stand is how I can literally say Lin Manuel Miranda Hamilton. I can sit there and say what's his name, Fluffy, right? Fluffy
Oh,
the
Gabriel
Hmm.
comedian,
Iglesias.
Comedian.
Gabriel
Yep.
Iglesias, right?
Yeah.
But then if I say Julio Anta or if I say
Hmm.
Roberto Clemente,
Hmm.
People might have less reverence. I can
right,
see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that bothers me.
Yeah, I think there's just a lack of education across the board, but also, that is purposeful in a lot of ways. I mean,
Hmm.
we're in Florida, and I know some of these books are not necessarily the most updated in the world. And to be
Yeah.
honest, I think I had a mischaracterization of even Cuba because of how America depicts
Hmm.
what's going on over there. And
Yep.
And Del Castro almost pitched for the Yankees.
There you go, right? There you go.
He did.
But it's so insidious, these legends, these stories that have been told about these countries, or in general. I know that we all have, like, even our families, right? We have stories about, how we present ourselves versus what's actually really going on. But yeah, that insidious nature that has kind of permeated through social media, and I guess I would say the lack of education has really hampered any sort of progress that can go. Not any sort of progress, but people are putting their boots on the ground and doing the great work to make progress, but it hampers a lot of it, especially the perception of progress, which I think is as important. If people think that things are not moving along, or certain cultures are not moving along or doing anything about their lot in life, they give up. They put their hands up in the air, and because there's always going to be another MCU movie, right? So
I think a great example of that is I follow a lot of like I think like travel influencers, like people who they travel full time, and one of the guys that I follow went to Iran last year, and it was, he was posting all of these videos that are showing like how much love he's getting from people there, how like society is structured there, all these things, not like a, pro regime kind of thing, but like these are not, the perception that we have of people that we are now meant to bomb is that they are primitive societies, that they, are not advanced, all these things, but when you actually go to these places, you see them for what they are, and a lot of this, to your point earlier, we're not supposed to know these things. Alex, you were not supposed to learn all these things in college. I was not supposed to learn all these things about Latin America. It was supposed to stay hidden. Your perception of Cuba was supposed to be what the US has always said it was, which was my perception growing up in Miami, as a Cuban American, But then I go to Cuba, right? The first in my family to actually return to Cuba since they came here in the early 60s. And I start to see something else, and I talk to people there, and I'm not hearing everything that I heard growing up or that I hear in the media here. I'm hearing something very different from that. And then I learn about the US embargo, and all of this talk about, socialism, communism doesn't work. Look at Cuba. It's like, well, if I surrounded your island and I didn't let any goods go in, capitalism would fail too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not, as we get older and as we stay curious and we continue to learn, I think we start unlearning a lot of the propaganda that we were fed.
I mean,
go ahead.
I hate to cut you off. I know, but I agree, and one thing, the Americans, and I love being American. My family, my father came from Ecuador.
It is. Yeah. It can be tumultuous. It can be tumultuous for those who come here seeking and they have a story in their head of what America is going to be and what America is going to provide for them. And yeah, the idea, and I even take this to the African American community, the idea that these people are a problem, but they weren't here. You know what I'm saying? Like they didn't choose to be here, or the people who are forced to be here because of what this country has done, for them to then turn around and kind of alienate and sort of create these characterizations of these whole cultures is a lot. And as someone with roots in Puerto Rico, I'm incredibly excited that you have crafted a story about this tumultuous time on the island. But before we dive into the book itself, I selfishly want to get your thoughts on this year's Super Bowl performance, because to me, that felt like another instance of an artist using a massive platform to kind of put these urgent issues in front of the mainstream audience that may not otherwise know that they exist. How, if at all, did that resonate with you?
No, I loved it. I mean, I have been a huge fan of Bad Bunny for years, and not just because of his music. I think he is, and some people, I feel like they look at me crazy when I say this, but Bad Bunny has had a massive impact on the I think the opening of people's political consciousness towards Puerto Rico. Whether it's, the things that he literally sings about in his lyrics or the things that he shows in his music videos.
Mhm.
I mentioned Bianca Grau earlier. She's the same journalist that in his video for El Apagón, there's a whole like 20-minute documentary at the end of it that she
Mhm.
produced about the, situation in Puerto Rico. But also, like seeing him with the sky blue flag version of the flag, the
Yeah, not the
original
darker blue.
version of the
Yeah.
Puerto Rican
Mhm.
flag. Yeah. And all those things, whether it's him with that flag or it's in the performance, people climbing power lines, all these little things, all these little, I view them as like, not just Easter eggs, but like breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
It's like now maybe you're someone who doesn't know anything about what's happening in Puerto Rico. You don't know anything about the history of it, but maybe you like his music. Maybe you just tuned in and now you're thinking, why are they climbing electrical poles?
Right.
Why is the flag different than the flag, like the Puerto Rican flag that I know? Why is he saying, I forgot, I think it was like God bless America or something,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
by America, he meant the Americas,
All of the
which includes the
Americas.
United States, but all of the countries,
Yeah.
and maybe that's the first time that you're like, oh, wait, yeah, South America, North America, I guess they all are part of the Americas.
Mhm.
And those are breadcrumbs for people, which I try to put in my books too, where I don't need to spell everything out, but it leaves breadcrumbs for people to do their own research and to
Yeah.
investigate. And I think that's something that he does really, really well. So yeah, I love the performance. I in issue 1 of Beast of Borikén, which I know you guys both read, right?
Mhm.
Because the thank you for the review. Who wrote the review, by the way?
My friend Frank, he's currently at work today. He definitely wanted to be a
Okay,
part
cool,
of this,
cool.
but
Yeah,
no, it
great
has no
review.
Latino. He has no Latino background. We wanted to
Okay,
put him on it because he would be the least, like he didn't have any skin in
bias.
the game, kind of. Yeah, he didn't have any
Yeah,
skin in the
yeah,
game, and he absolutely loved it. But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But yeah, what I was going to say is in issue 1, I sort of like quote lyrics from El Apagón in Loli's speech,
Mhm.
and so there's like all sorts of little Easter eggs like that too throughout the book. Of like taking all my influences in this story and putting them directly in the book.
Watching that performance, I obviously had the moments where I'm laughing, seeing the kid like sleep at the party, and
Yeah. Oh yeah.
the making of the piraguas and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
but then like I just the overwhelming sense of pride at the end because it's like you said, a lot of the Latino story is despite. It
Hmm.
is coming through the obstacle, and you would think you get graded by the cheese grater of life enough, right? You
Hmm.
have sharp and jagged edges, and you might be less inclined to want to deal with others, but his performance was so inclusive. It brought so many
Hmm.
people in, and it's just a reminder of my upbringing in a Spanish household where everyone was invited to the party.
Yep.
there was
Yep.
there was no there was no barriers there. You understand? The beers are over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't You could put your jacket on that bed,
Hmm.
and like this existence is for all of us. This music
Yeah.
is for all of us. This food is for all of us. And it wasn't until like when he got announced for this that I started to see such a pushback, and I'm like, where did this come from? It felt targeted.
Hmm.
It felt
Oh yeah.
like it was the work of the machine to
Hmm.
demonize. Oh, he's gonna come out in a dress, and if he did, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like what is? Oh, this should have been in English. You go to the opera all the time, and you
Hmm.
have no
Oh yeah.
no issues with it
Yeah.
at all.
It's in
But
Italian or
yes, yes,
whatever.
but this is obviously this is
Yeah.
too far
Yeah.
gone. You understand? We had a nipple a couple years ago, but him dancing and
I mean,
grinding in
I
front
want
of
no.
the that's a little crazy.
What I hate, and this is, I made the argument quick. I said, "Oh, you guys had no problem watching Shakira and J Lo shake her ass, and Shakira
Yep.
singing her beautiful language in
Yeah,
Spanish."
because we have no problem sexualizing Latina women, you
That's
know?
right.
Yes.
Or anybody
Yeah,
sexualizing.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But a man who may have some feminine qualities, which I find that all Latin men have that
Hmm.
little bit because
It's
of how
romance,
we.
bro.
It's what we
Hmm.
do, baby. It's what we do. And
Raised
so,
by strong women, you respect strong women. You respect women in
Hmm.
general.
abuela y la chancla. That's it.
I'm telling
And
Yeah.
you, bro.
and and so with Bad Bunny, I didn't know who Bad Bunny was almost until right before this performance. If you had asked me, gun to my head, name a Bad Bunny song, I'd have been like, just pull the trigger, bro.
Yeah.
But once I started researching him because of all the hate, and I'm sitting there going, "Yo, that Nueva York is dope," you know.
It is, man.
And then one of my jobs allows me sometimes to play music, and it's really funny watching the job divide when I play a Bad Bunny song, or the time of day. If it's in the daytime, it gets shut down immediately, and at night, and people are bumping to it, but then you'll see. And I'll play some Kid Rock, and then I'll play "I Am the Bull God" and go, "You like that song?
Yeah, there you go.
You're Christian guy. You like "I Am the Bull God"? That's cool with you."
That's another thing we should say. I'm a substitute teacher here in Florida, but Alex does teach here in Florida, so that's a whole other perspective dealing with the children of this state who, they might be told a different thing about, our culture and what this person was trying to do. But you would think this person was trying to do their own insurgency with the way that they were talking about stuff. Like overnight, we were all just going to open up the cages and let the animals out the zoo. And I'm like, so I love that it ended in a message of love and it ended in a message of unity because, even Loli, who's in the book, she has like this, she's compelling to me because she's filled to the brim with this righteous anger. And it's the necessary fuel a lot of the time for her cause and for so many causes. But you also have to find a way to marry that with what happens at the end of the fight. What happens when we push through and when we get past these obstacles. You don't want to be the like the hurt people scenario, right? Like the bullied bully, right? And the idea that we all just want to sit at the table and not to exclude anybody, but to put more seats, build more seats, so more people can enjoy this. What has been your personal experience interacting with like passionate individuals who seem entirely consumed with forcing change where none exists?
Yeah, I mean, I've been that person before. I think a lot of us have been, and I think that that is a kind of person that you do encounter a lot in activist and movement circles, and to your point, they can be extremely effective. They can be single-minded and really accomplish things that change things. But there does come a point when you need to get to the core of where your anger is coming from. And Loli is someone who has not gotten to that place when we meet her in issue one. She's experienced a lot of trauma because of Hurricane Maria and what came of that and the losses that came of that. And because of that, she has a very strained and misplaced relationship with her mother,
Yeah,
who she survived Hurricane Maria with. Um, and it's something that I think a lot of us, uh, when we go through trauma with someone, sometimes it's too difficult to be with that person,
yeah,
and to give them the time that they deserve, you know. And I know that I've experienced that personally, like I put that in Loli from a personal experience. Um, but there does come a point when you need to realize that it's misplaced and that that person also went through it and
yeah,
that person understands you and what you went through more than anybody else, right? So that's definitely a journey that Loli will go on throughout, our 5 issues in this book. But you see in issue one, she lies about when she last spoke to her mom. It's
yeah,
been a month since she spoke to her. She gets annoyed when her mom calls her. She's just so singularly focused on something that is extremely important, but it's not sustainable. And even as an activist, that's not sustainable. To just be driven purely by rage and anger. There also needs to be love. I
yeah,
think there needs to be a love of your community, of your people, and it needs to be more than just being angry at the bad guys. But yeah, so she's a very complex character and one that I think I draw from personally a lot.
yeah. It feels like a hair trigger sometimes between
Hmm.
being passionate, having that righteous anger, and just kind of being enveloped by it. It feels like a very dangerous tightrope to walk because the passion is well placed, it's justified, and so is the anger on occasion. But if it's not useful anger, it'll just eat you up. If it's not useful
Hmm.
energy, it could just consume you. I love early on that Loli uses the phrase of Puerto Rico without Puerto Ricans to describe
Hmm.
what opportunistic outsiders want the island to become. How long have you been aware of this sort of specific dynamic regarding how developers and corporate interests treat the island?
Yeah. I mentioned Bianca Grau earlier. Her watching her reporting, her videos on YouTube and Instagram um, have been super educating. But really, where this all started for me is through the Young Lords. So, for those of you who don't know, Young Lords were a revolutionary Puerto Rican organization in New York City and Chicago and other parts of the U.S. During the late 60s and early 70s. And, I mentioned Juan Gonzalez, who wrote Harvest of Empire.
Hmm.
He is one of the co-founders of the Young Lords also. So reading Harvest of Empire then brings me to the Young Lords, and there's a section about the lords in his book. But they were dealing with this back in the late 60s,
Yeah.
when there was this great migration from the island to the mainland, to the United States. And they were learning from their ancestors. I learned from the Young Lords. They learned from Pedro Albizu Campos, revolutionary who led a failed revolution in 1950 for independence of the island. And he learned from people before him, and they learned from the Tainos. And so there's this long history in Puerto Rico of colonization. From 1493, when Columbus, the Spaniards landed on Puerto Rico, to the US invasion during the Spanish American War, and then to this entire, neo-colonialism that has been on the island for decades now. So all of that, again, it's like breadcrumbs. It's all like a bridge that, leads me to the next thing and leads me to current day, where instead of, exporting all the sugar from the island, now we are kicking out the people in a way and taking the land. And now it's tourism, So I learned a lot about the privatization of the electrical grid and how that has just made electricity 3 times, 4 times more expensive for some people, and even more times less reliable. Um,
Hmm.
and how all of these people, I think it's also a combination of learning just more generally about what colonialism is, which
Yeah.
is literally the extraction of resources for the benefit of the colonialists, the empire, right?
Hmm.
Throughout history, whether it was the British, the Spaniards, the entire point of going to a place and colonizing it is to take resources from that place and send it back to the homeland and exploit it, and
Yeah.
that is what we still continue to do to this day in Puerto Rico, and what will continue to happen for as long as Puerto Rico and Puerto Ricans are colonial subjects of the United States. And that's something that I'm super passionate about. Um, and that is really at the heart of what this book is. It is characters who are experiencing and struggling against US imperialism and colonialism in Puerto Rico, sometimes through different proxies, like this land developer who is trying to develop protected land and literally bribing local politicians to let him build on it. Um, and that just leads to more Puerto Ricans leaving the island. There's more Puerto Ricans in the mainland today than in
Yeah.
actual Puerto Rico. And that continues every single day. More Puerto Ricans leave the island, and more millionaires and billionaires from the mainland move into the island
Yeah.
for,
Yeah, I
their
heard. I
piece of
heard Logan
paradise
Paul's
and for
hanging out
tax
over there.
reasons.
Yeah, Logan
Not
Paul's
hanging
hanging out
out.
over there. I was like, what's going on?
When he's introduced as a boxer, they say Logan Paul from Puerto Rico because that's where
Yeah.
he resides now.
I think they stopped that because I think
Did
he's
they?
probably getting enough backlash from it that he's like,
It's
all right,
Yeah.
I'm
crazy. It's
It's,
crazy.
it's
It's
yeah.
disgusting.
I what I love best about horror, I mean, sorry, A Beast of Borikén is the horror element because, in my opinion,
Hmm.
horror is often best when the monster is a metaphor for deeper
Yep.
sociological anxiety. So in Beast of Borikén, we have the chupacabra, but he isn't just a terrifying cryptid hiding in the shadows. It's framed as like an ancient spirit of vengeance, like from the island, a kind of protector dating back to, like you were saying, the indigenous Tainos. Can you talk about
Hmm.
weaponizing folklore as a metaphor for historical trauma and active resistance against colonization that you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, I mean, I think folklore throughout cultures has always been a form of resistance, even in just remembering our stories, whether they are orally told stories or they're written down. These are oftentimes resistance is memory, and keeping that ancestral memory. The first thing that people do when they come and they conquer you is they erase your history. And the only reason that we know stories of the Mexica or of the Maya is because there happened to be some Catholic priests that thought this is kind of fucked up, and let me start recording some of their stories before they all disappear. That's the
Yeah.
only reason. Because if it wasn't for those people who they were not saints, they were also complicit in their own way. But sometimes it just got so bad that they were like, hold on a second, maybe these are actual people too, and they recorded their stories, and that's how we know a lot of these stories of indigenous people. So I think that's a really important part of resistance also. It's remembering our history and not letting the occupier tell our story for us. Um, so I think folklore has always been resistance. But for me, the chupacabra, I'm kind of hinted to it earlier. I learned about the chupacabras watching Primer Impacto with my grandmother,
Every day,
and
bro. There was a
uh,
picture of a goat with holes in its neck, and it's like, yep, he came
yeah,
here.
there was a farmer in Honduras or in Mexico talking about how they saw him. So it was just like ever present in my life as a kid growing up in the 90s. I was born in 1990. Um, but then uh, as I got older and I started realizing that all the my favorite monster movies were the ones that did have another message to it,
Yeah.
like Creature from the Black Lagoon is a huge touch point for me. And I don't know if they intended the message to be the real monster is the humans that come to the jungle and disturb the ancient creature. I don't think that was the message, but that's the message I got from it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
100%.
Um, so I know the power of folklore and monster stories to tell real stories. And all of those influences kind of came together when it came time for me to start thinking about making my own monster story and my own cryptid, and using one that I was deeply familiar with,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
as a kid, but with a history that I think is really important.
Um, one of the biggest sort of compliments I can give to issue one, and I feel like the vibe of the whole story, it felt very much like Godzilla minus one, where
Mm,
you're
that's a
having
great
this,
compliment.
yeah, you have this feeling of like this island's been through enough. Like stop, stop. It's like I
Mhm.
remember every time that Godzilla showed up in that movie, I'm like, bro, like their people are
Yeah,
just now rebuilding. They're just now getting to a sense
yeah,
of normalcy, but it's all metaphor. It's all metaphor
yeah.
for what was going on to that island and how we demonize them as well. Before we
Hmm.
wrap up, Alex, I'm gonna give you some time to chat before we wrap
Well,
up here.
yeah, I
I
know,
hear
I
you.
know. This
But
has
it's
been a
great. Yeah, I'm loving this.
deeply emotional interview. Thank you for this time.
Of
And
course.
seriously, I want to see more of your work because I don't want you to just be another footnote that, oh, remember that guy?
Mm,
No, I want Julio Anta to be the same on the same level of, oh, Brian K. Vaughan and Julio Anta are
Yeah.
discussing immigration together because
mm,
Barrier they've just made a big deal about it being released in
mhm.
hardcover.
Yeah,
Why isn't Home coming out right next to it? And why aren't you guys
yeah.
being featured together at New York Comic Con?
We got to beat that
Mhm.
drum on this side too, though. We got to be the ones
Thank you
putting those
Vamos,
guys.
la
books
paranda, la
as,
paranda.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And
We
so, and
yeah,
I also want to just give a big up to Daniel. His art on this
Hmm.
book is beautiful. His
Killer.
face, like I was able to almost scroll through this thing so quickly just from his and
Hmm.
I looked at those faces and I saw my face. So thank you for
Hmm.
that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, Daniel is an incredible artist from the island, born and raised, still lives there. who's had his own experiences during Hurricane Maria.
Yep.
It was a true co-creator. He brought so much to my script through the art, so many details, and also just like we understood each other immediately. you
Nice.
know, um, we were speaking the same language, both literally, but also, metaphorically
Yeah.
with the themes. Yeah, incredible, incredible artist.
Um, as we wrap things up here, comics are inherently a collaborative effort, and you've been able to work with some incredible creative teams. How vital has collaboration been to the trajectory of your career? And, just to for some brownie points, what role did your wife play in helping you navigate your true place in this medium?
Yeah, man. Well, I'll say that my wife was the first person that encouraged me to make comics. I we were watching, I guess it was 2021, or no,
Hmm.
no, 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 no,
12?
2018 was when the Black Panther movie came out, I think.
Yes, yes.
And we were watching one of these, like, like mainstream, like ABC, NBC, one of these, like, here's the huge impact of Black Panther. All these people are lining up. How big of an impact is it having on like the Black community? Like very, like a really like celebratory piece. And she asked me, she's like, who's like what Latino superheroes are there?
Oh, wow.
And and
Yeah.
I was like, oh, like there's Miles Morales, right? There's White Tiger,
Yeah, yeah. Hector
And
Ayala.
no,
uh,
I get so mad at that.
yeah.
I know you gotta go. I know you said you gotta go, but I get
Miles.
really mad because like
Yeah.
Hmm.
Clemente used to always say we're all in this together
Hmm.
because he
Hmm.
played on a black team with the Pirates,
Yeah.
and a lot of people would say, oh, he's a black player, and he's sitting there going, sí, yo soy negro, pero yo soy
Hmm.
boricua.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
one thing I love about Latinos, we genuinely don't see color.
Hmm.
We see
We
the
come in so
culture.
many different colors. That's why.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right.
Yeah, no, we
And
got cousins that are white, and we got cousins that are some of the darkest people you'll ever
Yeah.
see.
when we see the color, it's just to describe you. Like, mira, tú
Yeah.
eres trigueño, tú eres negro, tú eres
Yeah, yeah,
blanquito. One of the most
yeah.
famous songs that bumps every day in a Latin household is La Negra Tiene Tumbao.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Celia
And
Cruz.
Yeah,
Celia Cruz.
Celia.
You know what I mean? And nobody, it's not like, oh, it's because she's black. It's just
Yeah.
she's dark skinned, but she's Cuban
Hmm.
and she's dope.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
everybody's falling over because she's amazing.
yeah.
And because I don't even know where I was going with this. Oh, the
Hmm.
White Tiger, right? So
Yeah.
Miles Morales is known as the Black Spider-Man, but it's like, yo, he's the
Mhm.
Puerto Rican Spider-Man too.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah.
forget it. So again, Barry. Oh, let's say
Yeah,
the black, but Barry the Barry. But it's like, yo, we're the
yeah.
same. White Tiger. Oh, White Tiger's this great character who gets his brains blown out.
Oh, and
Hmm.
Daredevil. Yeah. He just got.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah,
about legacy.
she asked me that, and I was like, yeah, like I named like a couple people. I was like, then we're getting to like real
And then you get
D
America.
list, F
Obscure.
list. Yeah,
Obscure.
yeah,
Yeah.
obscure. Yeah, yeah, America Chavez. But yeah, so then she was like, what? Because I was reading comics, obviously. Like I was already back into comics by then for years. She's like, why don't you write a comic one day? And I kind of like laughed it off, until I got the idea for Home eventually. And which was not that much longer after that. It was sometime in that same year in 2018, I had the idea, because that's when the family separation crisis happens. But yeah, like if she doesn't ever ask me that, I don't know if I ever start thinking seriously about writing comics. If maybe I feel embarrassed about like the idea of being like, I don't know, a 30-year-old who wants to start writing comics. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
So that was a huge. She played a huge role in that. And then my collaborators, I have been. I've been. I want to say I've been very lucky, but I've also been very intentional about ever since Home, because Home was my first book, and I found Anna, who's um, a Polish artist. I found her on Reddit. But ever since Home, every project, every book that I've ever worked on has been with a Latino artist. And that has been so important to me because it's not just about, oh, representation, whatever. It's about our culture and telling our stories, and also not having to explain to someone all these complex things. Like they understand our culture. And
You
I
don't gotta
have
tell them
worked
what
with
color
these
gandules are or whatever.
yeah. So
Good.
I've continued to work with these artists, right? Like Jacoby Salcedo is
Yes.
someone who, is not only one of my best friends, but my primary collaborator. And Yasmin Flores Montañez, amazing Puerto Rican artist. We've worked on a bunch of projects together. Gabby Mendez. This is my first project with Daniel, but I know we're gonna keep working together. So there's all of these. I have built what feels like in theater, like a repertoire company,
Yeah.
where like the same group gets back together and they might put up a different play in the spring and a different play in the summer, but they are all working together. And that's how I feel. And that's what I want to continue forever. I want to keep working with these people, keep
Mhm.
bringing new Latino artists into the fold, and just keep making stories that we're passionate about.
And
That's
you,
yeah, go ahead, brother.
I'm just hoping since you work at Image, and I hope maybe
Hmm.
you come across Robert Kirkman here and there.
Hmm.
The Energon universe is one of my favorite places to play in right now.
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
I know you don't do these superhero things, so to speak, but if you
Hmm.
ever get a chance to, G.I. Joe, I think, lends itself perfectly to you. Larry
Yeah.
Hama has created a cavalcade of characters from different cultures and backgrounds, but he himself
Hmm.
is of Japanese descent, I believe.
Yeah.
I think you could do a one shot, maybe a short story where you
Hmm.
give like Zap or Shipwreck a proper Latino background with a
Hmm.
Latino artist to give them that proper voice, if you know what I
Hmm.
mean. So
Yeah.
just an
Yeah.
idea,
Yeah.
just an idea. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
because they're like Mask, they just rearranged Mask where the
Hmm.
main character was a white guy in the cartoon, but now he's a black guy, which is
Mm.
great. I love it. So Shipwreck is Hector Delgado,
Mm.
Yeah.
but
Okay.
I've never heard Shipwreck speak Spanish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll keep that in the back of my mind. Do a little
Yeah.
research on these guys.
There are definitely characters out there that could use,
Yeah.
a more true to life
Refresh.
voice.
Yeah.
But also, thank you so much for giving a voice to the voiceless, for giving a voice to the migrants, for giving a voice to the immigrants, for giving a voice to those on islands that have been colonized, to those who don't get to say much. Not only have you put your heart on the line with this, but you've put your wallet on the line, you put your time on the line, your
Mm.
energy on the line with this. And I think that the success that you're seeing is because of that vulnerability and that transparency. And I think it's all truly well deserved. Your
Thank you,
fearlessness when
guys.
talking about this kind of stuff is also incredibly inspiring. I think as inspiring as anybody would say Superman, Spider-Man, Captain America is. You are somebody who is doing the actual work on the ground, who sees the world outside of our window and realizes that something is broken and is calling attention to it, not only in a way that's entertaining, but in a way that can serve all ages and literally change minds. And that's how art should be used, that's how it should be affected. And I just want to just praise you in general for using
Thank
these
you.
tools to do that, because it can just be a marathon for a lot of comics. It can just be issue, nothing wrong with issue 1,000.
Mm.
But you know what I'm saying? Sometimes long form without
Yeah.
saying much. But thank
Hmm.
you for being so intentional. Thank you for being so laser focused, and thank you for putting your passion and vulnerability on the line in a medium that doesn't always, reward that sort of thing, but where the people need it the most. So thank you so much for your
No,
time today, and thank you so much for your efforts, because that's how they should be described. Truly, effort, energy, heart, passion.
thank you guys for reading and for supporting. I obviously can't continue to do these things without people like you guys who are reading it and who care about the work. So thank you so much.
Yes, and
Really appreciate it.
we'll be beating the drum for Beast of Borikén issue 1 is out July 1st,
Hmm.
and we already have a review out. So if you're trusting what we do on this side,
Yep.
you'll know it'll be something worthwhile. But
Yeah.
as we end things here again, Julio, thank you so much for your time. And on behalf of Alex, we like to end these things by telling the people to always remember that you, yes, you are worthy. Thanks, guys.